going through my own story and processing what I was feeling and where that came from. It also helped me to open up and be able to share that with people because, as Ashley said, you do feel the shame and you feel almost embarrassed, like it's your fault.
Hmm.
You don't look at it as something that you're going through or that fundamentally changes your brain to where you almost don't have control anymore.
When we share our story with others, there is healing for ourselves, and I'm really happy that he's able to feel that. I would say start by sharing your story with just one person. So one person that you trust in your space, whether it be a family member, a friend, a coworker, whoever that you deem is a person that, could be that person for you to not necessarily give you all kind of feedback, but just be there to listen.
Because I had depression, anxiety as well. So anything that would come up that would start making me feel that way, 100% was never, all right, I got to deal with this. It was, all right, I have to turn to something to medicate so I can numb myself to this. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to deal with it.
Today, we are welcoming Ashley and Jordan. They have created a company called For the Good. They also have a podcast, For the Good, and their main mission is to bring positivity to the world and to bring mental health awareness to people so that we can all take care of ourselves and live healthier and more purposeful life. So this is going to be a good conversation, and we're going to talk about just mental health in general, but also more specifically men's mental health. So I'm really excited to share this conversation with everyone. So enjoy.
Well, my name is Ashley, and this is my husband, Jordan, and we started For the Good in 2018. And it was something that we've talked about for quite a while before then. We wanted to bring positivity into the world is how it started. As we saw that the world was taking more of a negative shift. So we began For the Good with the purpose of bringing these positive news stories to light. And then along the way, in the last 2 years, it has shifted. And as we mentioned, that we started a podcast and we host events and other things like that to be able to elevate people in this space of, positivity and mental health. So we've been able to dive in a little bit more deeper on that along the way.
In what ways have you seen was there a particular event or a particular experience that kind of said, oh, wow, this really kind of weighs on me and I really want to do something about it, or is it just accumulation or what?
Yeah, I think in general, like Ashley said, it's like every time you go online, if it's social media or, just watching the news in general, it's like every negative story is what's getting attention. And especially online, you see people get fired up and they're talking about it, and every good story just seemed to kind of go by the wayside. So we were thinking, well, the attention needs to be going to these stories. So if we just want to gather everything good we can and put it out there and see if people start taking hold to it. So I think that was generally where it came from.
Yeah. No, absolutely. We've been talking about this lately about like there's this, because our brain has this negativity bias. So we get attracted to the negative. It's, those types of things are rooted in survival. So you have to make a conscious effort to bring positive to the world. And so that's really cool that you guys are doing this.
Well, I actually published a book last year. It was in May, and it was writing a book actually was something that has always been on my heart since I was a little kid. That was something I grew up wanting to always do, but I just didn't know, when it would happen or how it would happen. And I just felt that life was preparing me for that moment to be able to bring those stories to light. And it really came from my own personal transformation, as you mentioned, about transforming pain into purpose. My dad passed away, it's going to be 6 years ago now. And he also, along in his life, he struggled with substance abuse. So that was something that in the book I shared was I viewed as shameful. So just my transformation of being able to work my way through that healing process and be able to bring a story like that to light for other people and allow them to know that they are also able to transform in this space and help others and serve them along the way too. I think that in our society, we too often don't talk about those hard things. and we kind of stuff and tuck those hard things down. So I think that it's really important for us to be able to have these conversations, for people to be able to have that hope and healing that they're looking for, rather than having the stigma or, as I mentioned, the shame related to it.
In what ways did you find that ability to speak about it or write about it or, share? Because, you're right. The shame holds the story inside us, and we're not able to, we start to, experience that struggle and everything like that. And we just keep holding back. No matter how bad it is for us, we keep holding back and don't share. So what allowed you to get there, to get to that point where you felt strong enough to do that?
So I started working with a business/life coach once we started For the Good. And in conversations with her, I shared with her that, in our mission, we wanted to be able to help and serve people. And she said, in order to do that, she encouraged me to be able to share my story too, to be able to connect with people on a deeper and more meaningful level.
So the mission became the greater good, and I'm gonna push through this. And what have you learned as you've pushed through that difficulty and working through the shame and things like that? Is there anything you learned or figured out along the way?
Number one, I learned my own strength. And two, I learned how powerful our stories are to be able to help other people along on their journey too. Because if we keep these stories inside, we're not helping ourselves, and we're not helping other people who are walking the similar journey. So it really inspired me to be able to share my story, to be able to connect with other people in this space of, addiction and grief, because we all need other people who share our stories to be able to help and serve one another.
Yeah. So did you guys face this together? Is this something that you guys tackled together, or how have you experienced this, Jordan?
Yeah, I was going to say, in addition to that, watching Ashley be able to talk about that and really dig deep and process all those feelings herself, that allowed me to come out with more of what I was feeling in my own life. Mm-hmm. So I've talked about it a little bit before, but I've had an addiction issue myself in my past. So as she was kind of navigating her way, it taught me as well. And going through my own story and processing what I was feeling and where that came from, it also helped me to open up and be able to share that with people. Because as Ashley said, you do feel the shame, and you feel almost embarrassed, like it's your fault. You don't look at it as something that you're going through, or that, fundamentally changes your brain to where you almost don't have control anymore. So finding power in that myself and in my story, that's what helped me to say, well, this is a major thing that's happening in the world. A lot of people are dealing with this. So if I can share my story, hopefully that's going to touch someone and at least bring the conversation to light a little bit more. Because I know something we'll probably get into later is with men, especially, we don't like talking about these things, and we don't like thinking that we have something wrong or that we can't control. And to have gone through that myself, it was very cathartic to process and go through what I was feeling and be able to share that with everyone else as well.
Why do you think men, I mean, I have my theories and my thoughts on that, but I'm curious as to your thoughts on why it's so hard for us men to share, to open up, to deal with our own crap,
Generally, I think it's just that role that we always play. Every guy kind of thinks you have to be the strong one, and you can't show if you have a weakness that, you don't want people to see that. You got to kind of always be at the top of your game, and you don't like speaking about things that are bothering you. Even, with friends, like you kind of get around and, sometimes they'll start getting to a deeper conversation, but what I've generally seen with a lot of my male friends is it stops. Like after they start getting into something, you don't want to go past a certain point. And I think we all generally just feel that we shouldn't be showing that we have issues. We shouldn't show that we're hurting, and it's about being tough. And when it comes to mental health, that's what people have to understand is, it's not being weak or being physically or mentally weak. It's something that, deals with our brains and how they work in relation to everything. So it's really just breaking that stigma of not wanting to talk about it, not showing that we could have weaknesses. And really, we want the conversation to go to where, you feel strength out of showing these things instead of feeling weakness. And so a lot of self-empowerment too, I think, comes from it.
Our brain is a social brain, and we, when we're stressed, our brain wants us to seek out support. And yet we've got this culture that stifles that, right? And, it says, no, you got to deal with it yourself. And, so we are working against our biology, especially with men. Men are more likely, to kind of stifle that fear of losing control. Did you have that fear of losing control of if I open up, if I share my story, if I work on these things, that everything's gonna fall apart or it's gonna get really bad?
Definitely. It was hard to just kind of admit everything was the biggest step, in the beginning. And yeah, I think, there was a point in my life where I kind of backed away from everybody, and I just clearly wasn't myself. So I figured people knew I was maybe going through something, but at the same time, you don't like saying it, and you don't like saying, yep, this happened. I'm dealing with it. It's, over now. I want to share my story. But yeah, there's a lot of, back and forth. It took me a long time to even, talk about it really with family and friends, but then to put it out into the world was the biggest part. So that's why, I say Ashley, when I watched her be able to go through all that and share her story, it was like, all right, I can do this too. And of course, with her support, just knowing, this is something bigger is at play here.
I'm curious, were people surprised that you had stuff that you were dealing with, or did they kind of like, it's about time, or we kind of knew?
I think a little bit, because I'm just generally, just always happy-go-lucky and kind of life of the party, just like being the funny guy in the room. And clearly there was a point where I just wasn't that anymore. I was very introverted, and, I was very short with people. I think my mood definitely changed. And for a number of years, I just didn't seem like myself. And that's where I think the biggest, issue comes, is when you don't feel like yourself, you definitely are not wanting to put that you into the world. So after just admitting it and knowing I was dealing with this, after you do tell people, it kind of comes around, and they might say, oh, I kind of figured something was going on. Right. But, until you say it, people can just speculate. So it's like, just putting it out there and showing that, this is something that could happen to anybody. I never thought would happen to me. So to say, yeah, this is something that really just affects people that would never think it would happen to them. It just kind of makes it more relatable for people. And, I'm sure there's a lot of people in my life that are maybe struggling with things that they're not ready to talk about yet. And the hope was just to start the conversation and to say, if someone I know is going through this, please open up and reach out to me. I'd love to talk to you. So it's just trying to create more bonds with people.
Mm-hmm. Ashley, what was your experience through all that?
Sure. Well, actually, when we first started dating, he opened up with me right away about it. So it was something that we had these conversations already. Although along the way, as you mentioned, that for him, there was a transformation, as well as to him being more open to talking about it with other people and having these kinds of conversations. So I've just really been proud of him along the way to be able to step into this space, because I feel like when we share our story with others, there is healing for ourselves. And I'm really happy that he's able to feel that.
Mm-hmm. And in what ways have you seen healing when you guys share your story and talk to people about it? I mean, what have you noticed about yourself in terms of that healing?
I think partly it's more just feeling like I'm myself again. And it's, gaining confidence back and feeling like I do have something to share, and that I can help people and be, a positive inspiration on people again. Because really tying it all together, to go back to, that shame and the guilt aspect, once you start feeling that way, you kind of do everything you can to stay out of the light and to like do your own thing. You don't want people to know what's going on. So to come back on the other end, it's, not just saying personally I feel better, but letting everyone else know that it is very possible to work through anything and to come out a better person, and to not look back at it and think, how could that happen? Why did I do that to myself? More of, I was there, now I'm here, I'm moving forward every day. It's something to take pride in. And again, just hoping that people can look out and say, all right, this is more common than I thought. And this is not something to hide. And it's something to talk about to really bring about healing. And that's, I think, the ultimate goal.
I would say being able to talk about it is number one, because it took me up until we almost got married to talk about, everything that I experienced with my dad, with Jordan, because it was just something, like I mentioned, that it was a shameful thing. And how is he going to view this? And how is he going to look at me and look at my family? And being that he never, unfortunately, got to meet my dad, like, what would he think about him? Mm-hmm. I think that the most difficult thing for me and into that healing was being able to have these conversations like we're having today, because 2 years ago, I would have never wanted to talk about this. It would have been such a difficult thing. So I just feel inside different when I have these kinds of conversations, viewing it as something that someone can listen to and be helped by, rather than what are they going to think about me, and how are they going to view, my situation and all of that, as it relates to that judgment and the stigma related to addiction.
Our fear is that people are going to think that we're weak or whatever. But then as you start telling your story, more often than not, people are like, I can relate to that, or I can really connect to that. That's not too far off from what I'm experiencing. And we, the perception and reality are completely different. Has that been kind of your experience, where people start, even people that are as closed as you guys maybe have been in the past, start opening up as well?
Yeah, we've had, family and friends, and even people, that we've connected with on the internet come to us and share their stories. And as you said, when we talk, we hold these stories in because we view them as a weakness, but really in our experience, we viewed them as such a strength, because there is strength in these hard parts of our stories, and they make us who we are and really develop our resiliency and build us up into the person that we are, called to become and called to be. So we've had really positive experiences with people that we know and people we don't know, as I mentioned, and some of them have been surprising, because just like us, that they've held these stories in. So it's something really incredible to see that transformation in someone else as well.
To steal from Brene Brown, I don't know if you're familiar with Brene Brown, but she says there's no courage without vulnerability. And and I remember a story she tells on different, whether it's her TED Talk or podcast, where she'll talk to like military personnel or sports teams and say, can you think of any real challenge or struggle that you've had to go through where you didn't have to overcome something, or maybe basically feel vulnerable, and knowing all these big strong men or whatever, kind of like, no, we have to be vulnerable. There's vulnerable in everything that we're doing, and so even though kind of on maybe an outward level we're expressing that we can't be vulnerable, but in reality, when we reflect on it, you can't have courage without that vulnerability. What thoughts do you have about that?
Yeah, I completely agree. Another way I see that is, when I talk to people, whether it's my friends or whatnot, something I always say is, for you to truly experience like true happiness and to be, as happy as you could be, you have to have that true sadness too. Mm-hmm. You have to be able to hit both sides of the spectrum. So I think if you don't know the lowest lows, then you don't really understand the highest highs. So you have to have something to kind of reference it back to. And I think that's just part of the human experience is, feeling every emotion and going through every part of it. And when you tie it back to strength, it's, when you get in those low points, it's having that courage to pick yourself back up and to not give up and to not quit. Because unfortunately, I've had a number of friends who have passed away due to overdoses, to addiction issues. And, it's the saddest part is that they couldn't talk about this. They didn't let people know. A lot of people didn't know that these problems were going on when it happened. And having that courage to kind of stop in the middle of it and pull yourself out of it is so much harder than what people really know. And I think that's what we're trying to normalize as well, is that it takes true strength and courage to come out of something like that and bring yourself to a higher level. So yeah, I 100% agree with that statement.
Do you have any thoughts, Ashley, about it?
I agree with everything he said, and as well as the quote, when it comes to courage and vulnerability, that the two definitely go hand in hand together, and there's not one without the other, that it does take such courage to have these conversations and to be able to not only bring yourself out of something that is really difficult and hard, but into a place of hope and healing to be able to help other people in this space.
And I almost see, and we always kind of term it as, crisis is opportunity, problems are opportunity, and certainly the way we look at life. And I would even say, can you compare yourselves in terms of, being able to face those negative emotions compared to when you really struggled to face those negative emotions, and maybe kind of the difference in terms of yourselves in terms of how you experience that now, that, okay, now I'm not going to try to avoid these negative emotions, but I'm actually going to try to work through them in some, productive way. Any difference you experience with that?
Yeah, I think, back when I was having issues of my own, it was any negative emotion or, because I had depression, anxiety as well. So anything that would come up that would start making me feel that way, it 100% was never, all right, I got to deal with this. It was, all right, I have to turn to something to medicate so I can numb myself to this. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to deal with it. And that's how that kind of all starts, is not wanting to deal with, anything hard, any type of emotional thing. But I think when you start doing that, you realize you then can't experience the good emotions. You turn yourself off to it. And if you experience something good, it doesn't last long because you're already doubting yourself and you're saying, well, this doesn't feel right. So that all had to change, is saying, all right, now feeling these negative things, that's dealing with it right away. It's all right, this is making me feel, anxious, or I'm getting a little bit sad about this. So what am I going to do to change this right now? And I think it just teaches you how to navigate through that, and also just understanding that you don't want to feel that way. You want to be happy. You want to feel, purpose, and you want to go out every day and just not be weighed down by anything. So it's that want of being better that really guides you through that. So that's kind of the end goal, is getting to that place where you want to deal with those emotions because you don't want to feel that way.
Well, and I almost find that, you could try to avoid the negative emotions as much as you want, but it's going to fight harder and harder to come out. And so you end up having to deal with it at some point. And, our hope certainly would be that people try to go after that early, that rather than later, rather when it's really hard to come back from.
So when we first started, as I mentioned, it started that we wanted to put these positive stories out into the world. And as we, started digging in deeper, our message kind of shifted. So we started getting more into mindset, because in the experiences that we've had, really our mindset and has shifted the way that we view the world around us and our difficult situations. So that's kind of been where we've been talking about more so on the podcast and on our social media and that as well. And then once we continued, we started digging a little bit more deeper, and it really all goes back to our mental health. So that is like our deep reason and our deep why, is to be able to help people in that space. As Jordan mentioned, that he had struggled with depression and anxiety. And, in my situation, I have the grief related to it, and also with my dad. So helping people in that deeper way is our ultimate mission. And we help them in the space of, as I mentioned, the social media, but also on our podcast, to be able to have conversations like this one. So we have guests join us, and, between him and I, we have these conversations, but we really touch on these hard topics, but they're also much needed, in the space of grief, addiction, what else do we have? Substance abuse, all across the range of having conversations like this to be able to help in this space of mental health and mindset. So really that is our driving force behind what we're doing to help other people in this space.
How have you guys framed mindset? What kind of things do you guys discuss? Because I think mindset is definitely an important piece. But what kind of mindset are you encouraging or hoping to get people to focus on?
Initially, I'll just say like how I started getting into it was I watched The Secret. If you're familiar with the film or the book, The Secret, and what it comes down to is, our thoughts are what essentially make our lives. They, if you're a happy, optimistic person and you're expecting good things and you are, putting your best self out there, then your life is going to reflect that and you're going to manifest that type of life. And, as we said, if you're stuck in these negative places or, you're dealing with depression, anxiety, and your focus is always, this is bad, things are never going to get better. Really, when you look at it, how do you expect that to ever change if your mind is always saying this is going to be bad forever? I'm never going to do this. I'm never going to be this. So the big thing, though, is that people generally don't think that way. We're kind of on autopilot all the time where we just, we go about the day and we don't really think about what we're thinking or what we're putting out there. So in general, we want people to understand that you have to take that second to say, well, am I thinking about this the right way? Am I bringing about good things into my life? Am I approaching this the right way? So it's more so just getting the mind to start seeing the good in things, because a lot of the times there's, something horrible can happen, but we're so focused on that bad event that we're not looking at what the ripple effect of what good could have came out of it, So there's always a choice, we feel, as to how you're going to react. Because, as they say, life is, 90%, how's it go again? 90% how we react to it.
Yeah.
10% what happens, 90% how we react to it. Mm-hmm. And really after every event, you always have a choice, and it's, how are you going to deal with this? Or is this going to weigh you down, or are you going to move forward?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm talking about, we do spend most of our time in our unconscious. We're just on autopilot and we're just going through the day. And so I have found that a big struggle with, working on our mental health has a lot to do with staying in autopilot and not consciously taking steps to, like, we have to work at, finding the good, right? It's not something that, especially if we're in this rut for a really long time, it's hard to kind of pull ourselves out and then do that. So that mindset takes work, right? And there's struggle, and maybe that's kind of overwhelming for people, right? The idea that, gosh, this, to try to get to a place where I want to be is going to take some work. It's going to be hard. And I'm going to have to face some really challenging situations. And I'm not, do I want to face that? Or is it easier for me to just, crawl back in my hole and do that? So do you guys, maybe even from your own personal experience, because you guys are focused on mindset, are there things that you do to help yourself stay in that mindset, to get out of autopilot, to, take a conscious effort for that?
Going back to what you mentioned earlier, I believe that this is something that is a daily practice that, we work on every single day. And I feel like sometimes people can get caught up in thinking, well, I've listened to a positive podcast, or I've done this, and, why isn't it working? Why is my mindset the same way? So I feel like it's such an intentional thing. So we really prioritize, creating this intentional life and filling it with things that are of value and of purpose, and just to really be able to fill ourselves up in this way. So something that I personally do in the morning is I love to write, and I journal, and every morning I write down 5 things that I'm grateful for, just to be able to start my day on that positive note and take that shift. Because if you roll out of bed and you hit the snooze and you're off, hitting the ground running, you're not really framing your mindset in a positive way and getting yourself prepared for that day. So I think that there is such a power in our mornings, and that's just one of the practices that I personally do, and I found that has helped shift my mindset. So there are things that we do and that worked for us that we share with others, and we'll tell them it may not work for you, but give it a try. I mean, every specific person is different. So you just have to try something until it works and keep doing it repetitively. And then that's when you'll see the true change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I'm more vocal. So most of the time, like when I'm driving into work every day, it's not just putting on talk radio and just going, oh, traffic. Oh, that person cut me off. It's, as I'm driving, I just say, today's going to be great. Something unexpected is going to happen. That's going to be very good for me. I'm going to be in a great mood today. I'm so excited about this. And, even looking forward, tonight, there's a good hockey game on I want to watch. I can't wait for that. There's also power in finding the little things and just holding on to that. But in the same space, I also, for a time, when I started making that shift, I would, be feeling good and I'd have my good days. But the reality of, having anxiety, having depression, you never truly get rid of it. It's going to come back. So as I would fall into, getting into a negative mindset again or having a bad day, it was really easy to say, why is this happening? I work so hard to not think this way. And when you start doing that, it just starts pouring on. You start getting really upset and it's, finding fault in yourself again. So I think part of it is also allowing yourself to have those moments. And if you're going to have something bad happen to you, or if there is a negative event, we're not telling you just say, oh no, just look at it in a good way. It's totally fine. You have to feel those feelings. You have to feel the sadness and the grief. And like you said, it's, feeling that, but then also saying, okay, I've felt it. And now I want to be out of this. I want to be good again. So I'm going to actively do this. And it's not sitting in those moments for long. Mm-hmm. So I think it's allowing yourself to feel those thoughts, but also reminding yourself that every day there's at least one little thing that you can find that just makes you feel good.
Well, and I wonder, and I've talked to clients about this, I wonder if the fact that we evaluate emotions as good or bad gets in the way of us just being able to learn or understand them so that we can, like I always see emotions as being information for us to tell us something's going on in our life that we have to address. If we're sad, we have to maybe mourn because we've lost somebody we care about. If maybe it's because, someone broke up with us in a relationship and we have to seek out support. And that's what the sadness is trying to tell us. Or anger is because we didn't like that someone did something and we're offended by it and we need to resolve this issue with our friend. But when we kind of go, oh, I can't have a negative emotion because that's bad, then we create these emotions that are supposed to be informative and information and turn it into something that we should be scared of. So, and I think, how do we use those emotions? Because I think you bring up an interesting point is having a positive mindset doesn't mean that we just dismiss negative emotions, right? Or we don't painful emotions. We don't just say, oh, they're not happening. I can't possibly recognize them. I got to stay positive. You should probably give those painful emotions some of it, some attention, right?
So one thing that I do right now is I've been working as a grief facilitator. So after my dad passed away, I went to a workshop and I was inspired by people who were helping other people in this grief space. So I went back and I've been facilitating the groups and they've had me come back for, speaking sessions and whatnot. And one thing that I've talked about is feeling to be able to heal. So feel to heal. And a lot of people have said that has resonated with them because they feel like, as you mentioned, these hard emotions, they don't want to feel them. So it's kind of easier just to stuff and tuck them away. But it's just so important for our well-being and that healing that we need to be able to feel, any of these range emotions. And just as Jordan mentioned too, not to get stuck in that place, but make sure that you feel it and then you are able to move forward from that too.
Yeah, when you try to stop yourself from feeling it, then you're not allowing it to be fully expressed. And so then you stop it from going through its full, experience. And so then you actually probably make the emotion stronger and more intense and, and then that becomes overwhelming and you can't, overcome that. So allowing those emotions to be fully expressed and things like that. So what I think the other piece in terms of getting people to support their mental health is the power in relationships and connection. I would imagine that in your healing, there's connection, whether it's going to that facilitator group and connecting with those folks or with each other in your relationship. Ultimately it's how do you help people help each other or support each other, or do you guys address those types of things in the work that you're doing? Or is that a topic that comes up in terms of, because we have family around us, friends around us, people around us, and maybe people that want to help or are concerned or worried about us, how you guys navigate that?
Yeah, there is such a power in community, and we do share that often on our podcast, because in my experience that I've shared is going through the grief workshop, going there for the first day. I necessarily never experienced that kind of close grief before. So going into a space with, a group of strangers and having such a hard conversation with them was difficult. So over time, I've just realized in my own self that there is this power in community and connecting with people. And that, that's connecting with someone, with other people who can relate to that, but also having the kind of connection like Jordan and I too, to be able to have these kinds of conversations with one another and help each other along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially with friends and family, it's the same way. I think the people you're closest to, there is that like safeguard where you don't really want to share a lot of things. Cause especially for me, when I look at people I was closest to, I would think, well, they hold me in such high regard and they think so highly of me. If they know this, will that change? Or are they going to be weird around me or think that I have, something I'm dealing with that they can't, really focus on or talk about? And when I did open up with people, I noticed that those connections became deeper, they became stronger. And even with some family and friends I'm very close to, they started opening up with me about things. And really it's more connected than you would think. I think a lot of people think to say that you have these issues that you're going to alienate yourself, and it's, you're kind of on the outside. But when you start realizing that in some way or form people have these things that are going on, and you make it a connective thing, and it's how do we help each other, and what do you do to get through this, what kind of tips do you have? So I think as we talk about the ultimate thing to realize is that we are all together in this. Like it is a big community. And as we open up those lines of communication, you start knowing more things about people, and you see them in a different way. And it's no longer, a negative thing to say, oh, they dealt with that, they're off. It's, wow, they went through that and look where they are now. That's someone I want to look up to. That's a role model. And I think, like we say, the pain into purpose, like to channel those feelings. And if you're able to turn it into something better, we just want to turn around and really help as many people as we can is what the goal is for us.
Mm-hmm. Do you find with your friends and family that you share that do you have certain expectations of how they should be or what you want from them? Because I'm curious as to, I think a challenge for family members that have friends or family that are struggling with mental health is, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to help. Or I go the opposite. I'm going to try to solve all your problems. I'm going to, jump in there and tell you got to change your life because you're, struggling, and that ends up causing issue. And so I'm curious as to your guys' experience with that, because in that statement of community, that's really powerful, but we want to also, how do people generate or establish that sense of community in terms of helping and supporting people's mental health?
I think the more open you are, the more clear it kind of becomes. In the beginning, to just kind of say it, I think it was more of a weird topic for people, like, really not wanting to talk about it. And like, if I brought it up, then we can talk about it. But also kind of avoiding it was more so in the beginning. And as I became more honest, especially, with my parents or with my family, like they saw me go through it. But even when, I thought I was over it, and I still would have, relapse back into it and have those weak moments, then it became more clear that, all right, we need to talk about it. we can't just sit and watch it happen and pretend it's not happening. So I think as it became more clear to people, it was almost unavoidable. And I was like, well, it'd be worse to not say anything. Mm-hmm. And especially when I, opened up and showed that I was willing to talk about it, people seemed like they could approach me more. And so I think it's the more that you accept it and you're willing to tell people about it and, approach it in a way that you're saying, all right, I want to be better. I want to be done with this for good. I want to help you through it. Then it becomes more of an easy conversation to have.
Right. The more times you do it, the easier it becomes because your brain and you get used to, you get familiar with it. So it's not so scary or threatening to do that. And you brought up the word alienation, like alienating yourselves. Like if I open up and share, I'm going to alienate myself or whatever. But I would imagine that the opposite is true. If I don't, and I start isolating myself or pushing people away or whatever, that's really where the alienation happens. Is that kind of been your experience?
Yeah, I think in my own mind, I believed that was happening, even though it wasn't, because really, if I look at it, it's like everybody who didn't know what was going on, out of nowhere, I just kind of stopped being there. I didn't show up anymore. I wasn't reaching out. I wasn't, myself if you talk to me. And I was definitely alienating myself. And in my mind at the time, I was thinking, well, everyone else is doing it to me. They don't want me around. They're treating me a certain way. And I think it was kind of like my own safeguard in my head, because I was trying to tell myself it's okay to not be around. It's other people aren't ready for you to be around. You don't want to get in the mix of it. So I definitely held back. And the more I set myself back, the further down I went into depression, anxiety, and feeling so much worse about myself. And even in the beginning, when Ashley and I started dating, it was hard for me to open up. It was hard for me. Like, I told her a little bit was going on, but it was very hard to really get into it because I was afraid. I was afraid that, I liked her so much in the beginning. I'm like, if I tell you all this, maybe you look at me in a different way and you're going to say, I don't want to go down that road. So there was a lot of trust that had to be established too. And when I was able to trust again and say, clearly the way she approached it and the way she talked to me, she cares. She wants to help me. She's not, put off by what I'm saying. So that gave me strength to continue to open up and share more. And the more I did that, I just found so much strength in her and in my family and the people that I started saying, hey, by the way, I wasn't around because of this, and just trying to normalize the conversation like we talk about. And I think that's when everything started shifting again, was when I could say, all right, I want to be back to my life. I want to be me again. And I don't want anybody to feel weird about it or, to think I'm a different person. I just want to be seen as, the guy that you all remember me being. And it was kind of trying to find that old self again and bringing it back to life.
And I don't know if you had this experience, Ashley, with that, but, the perception and reality are two different things, because, him being more genuine about who he is and what he's experiencing was probably more endearing to you than if he just kind of put on this facade every time, because you probably over some time probably would have seen through it a little bit and been like, he's not willing to be, his true self. Is that, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm glad that he was able to have those kinds of conversations with me, because as I mentioned with my past, as it related to my dad, like my family, it was more related to that stigma and that shame. So we didn't have those kinds of conversations. So I was really glad to be able to talk about that with him. And I think just my experiences, as he said, he thought it was going to, have me run in the other direction, but I experienced those kinds of things in my life. So I was open to having those conversations with him. And it wasn't really anything that, I hadn't experienced before. So I wanted to be able to be there to support him in that way.
Yeah. In terms of what we've talked about is actually probably encouraging people to be more open and communicate and talk about mental health. And what would be your recommendations or thought about like a first step, like how to get your toe in the water versus making a full cannonball into the deep end of it, because this can be kind of an overwhelming thing. I mean, it was overwhelming as you guys both experienced, but then once you started, it got easier and easier. What are your thoughts about how to help people, make that first step or, move in that right direction?
I would say start by sharing your story with just one person. So one person that you trust in your space, whether it be a family member, a friend, a coworker, whoever that you deem is a person that, could be that person for you to not necessarily give you all kind of feedback, but just be there to listen. So I would say, start with one person, because it can be such an overwhelming thing to come out, especially when it's something that's hard, whether it's with your family or with yourself personally, and have these kinds of conversations.
Initially, it's also just admitting it and admitting you need help or that you need someone to talk to. Like we talked about, especially for guys as well, I can do this myself. I don't need help. I don't need to talk to anybody. And it's normal to do that. We need to do that. So I think letting yourself know that it's okay to ask for help. And then, another thing that we talk about is the way the world is now, we have access to anything we want in the world in our palms, in our phone.
Very quickly.
Yeah. So to just go online and even just do a little bit of research yourself, and to not only look up, maybe different ways to manage it or different signs to maybe see if this is something you're going through. But, even with myself, it was seeing different, people that I looked up to, or different celebrities or sports guys or whatever, hearing their stories, because more people are coming out now that are, we didn't have any idea that they were dealing with something. So it's, looking at someone that you look up to and saying, all right, they went through this, I can do this too. I can find strength in their journey. So it's, doing a little bit of research and just looking at what's out there and what kind of resources, because there's innumerable resources out there.
I like that. Yeah, absolutely. And then the cautionary tale of be careful on Facebook looking for things, but find kind of the right things that are going to be, going to do well for you. Right. So anything you would like to leave our audience with in terms of anything with you guys and For the Good, where you can be found, things like that, to end the show?
Sure. Well, our podcast is on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, all those kind of fun channels. You can search For the Good Podcast. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and our website is forthegood.com.
And you can get a t-shirt, right? You can get t-shirts on yeah, I think you're wearing one. I can only see there we go. Okay.
Yeah, and 10% of the proceeds from all of our apparel and the affirmation cards and everything that we have benefit mental health charities locally and worldwide. So we wanted to be able to give back in this space that we talk so much about. Great.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashley and Jordan. I appreciate you guys coming on. I appreciate talking about these definite important topics, especially diving in a little bit to men's mental health, because I think that's something that doesn't get talked about enough. So I appreciate your time. Thanks for the things that you do and For the Good and everything. So have a good one.